Hi, my name is Paige D. Hart, and I am the founder and senior minister of Spirit Realization Fellowship. Tonight, I want to share with you on the topic of a teaching that I've named Only Love is Real. And I must admit, I named it after an MC Yogi song because it's one of my favorite songs. But anyway, I want to start by reading a couple of readings from both the Bible and A Course in Miracles, and then I'll give a little talk about it. So first I want to start with Matthew 6:22 through 23. The lamp of the body is the eye. If therefore your eye is good, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. If therefore the light that is in you is darkness, how great is that darkness? And then now I'm reading from the first few pages of A Course in Miracles. It begins by saying, this is A Course in Miracles. The Course does not aim at teaching the meaning of love, for that is beyond what can be taught. It does aim, however, at removing the blocks to the awareness of love's presence, which is your natural inheritance. Everything that comes from love is a miracle. Miracles reawaken the awareness that the spirit, not the body, is the altar of truth. You are a miracle, capable of creating in the likeness of your Creator. Everything else is your own nightmare and does not exist. Only the creations of light are real. You should be thankful to God for what you really are. The children of God are holy, and the miracles honor their holiness, which can be hidden but never lost. Miracles honor you because you are lovable. They dispel illusions about yourself and perceive the light in you. Thus, they atone for your errors by freeing you from your nightmares. By releasing your mind from the imprisonment of your illusions, they restore your sanity. So I wanted to talk about this because I myself have been on a personal journey with the Holy Spirit since November 30th of 1986. One thing from the very beginning that I became aware of is that Jesus is my teacher. And it's not the Jesus that sometimes the doctrines of the church, it's not that Jesus. For me, it's the real Jesus. There was times when I felt like I might have been being deceived, but 33 years down the road, I would say, as he would say, by their fruits you will know them. So I trust him implicitly. And one of the things he's worked with me so closely on is to understand that the meaning of the word forgiveness is to give truth for error. Exactly like the Course is saying. And so that's always been where he first started working with me. And that's what I want to start with by talking to you about the first foundation. Because I do want to offer you a miracle. Because right now, maybe you know this, and probably you don't. But you are so much more than you know. You are not a human being, for starters. And if you go, what, on that one? Well, then that means you got a lot to learn. But welcome to the party, because it's the greatest show on earth to know these truths. So what we all are is spiritual beings having a human experience. But the deal with that is that the truth of that is buried deep within us. I am also a counselor, so I know a lot about psychology. And Freud theorized that children create defense mechanisms to disassociate and stuff like that, or reflect or project, so they don't have to face difficult situations and scenarios. And in the same way, when we come in as a seedling, as a child, our conditioning starts to build walls around this secret truth within us. And unfortunately, these walls begin to be constructed by a lot of lies. I myself, I was born in 1961. So that means I was growing up in the 60s. I was a young child in the 60s. My mother went to a mental institution when I was 8 years old. And so I began to have serious abandonment issues. And of course, I didn't know all this then. I didn't even know this in my early recovery, because I'm also in recovery. But one of the things that I dealt with to deal with my emotions was eating. And that's, anything that changes your brain chemistry, lots of times it'll make you feel better. And that was one of the things, that's the way I coped. But unfortunately, that caused me to weigh like 205 pounds when I was 12 years old. So I was raised in the 60s, early 70s, being an extremely overweight girl. And in that day and in that age, there was I was going to say unspoken message, but BS. It was the spoken message that it is not okay to be fat. You are not supposed to go anywhere without your makeup. You are not supposed to go anywhere without wearing a girdle. It is not okay to just be you. And one time when I was about 13, I wanted to get some clothes, and I was talking to someone that I was going to get some school clothes, and that person said, "You're so fat and ugly, nobody's going to look at you anyway. Why do you want clothes?" Well, those words stuck with me. They became the mantra inside my own head. You're so fat and ugly, nobody's ever going to look at you. You're so fat and ugly, no one's going to look at you. So that started laying a pretty deep groundwork for some self-loathing. And then, of course, my solution for that was drugs and alcohol. Because then that gave me the cocky bravado that I was beautiful and I could sing and I could dance and all the things that deep in my heart I didn't believe were true. I'm not going to say deep in my heart, but close to those core beliefs. I did not believe that was true. So when I first got on the journey, one of the first books that came into my life were Emmett Fox's trilogy of Power Through Constructive Thinking and the Ten Commandments and the Sermon on the Mount and Louise Hay's book, You Can Heal Your Own Life. And in all of those books, both of those authors spoke of affirmation. At the time, I didn't understand that along with affirmation, you need to use denial first. But affirmation is about starting to affirm positive thoughts about yourself, whether you believe them or not. So I would try to start this affirmation of, I love myself and I accept myself just the way I am. But then immediately in my mind, I'd hear, you fat slob. So it took a while because I sure didn't believe it. But like I said, I also didn't understand then that the important thing is to deny, that I need to say no to you're so fat and ugly, nobody's going to look at you, and say yes to I accept myself just the way I am. Jesus told me that saying affirmations without first doing the denial part is like putting old wine in new wineskins, or another way of putting it is like putting rose petals in a bucket of BS. So those are things I worked with and worked with and worked with. And for a long time, this is the thing, and I like what Emmett Fox talked about, because when you plant a seed, it doesn't just shoot up overnight. We wish it did. And sometimes we want to dig it up and look at it or bake a cake and open it and see if it's ready and all those things. And it doesn't happen that way. So for a long time, I was doing it because I was reading about it, but it wasn't really changing anything. But anyway, I was still trying. But during this time, to just give you an example of how dark my reality was, and it wasn't how dark my reality, the one I made, not the one that could be created with love. It was a dark place. I'm also the author of a book called Unmasked One Soul's Journey from Anonymity to Identity. It's a mouthful. But it has entries from my journals during the time of my addiction and my first 15 years of my recovery. I now have almost 28 years. But I want to share something with you from just an excerpt from this book because it really does capture how I felt. So this is a entry from September 1st of 1988. And it says, I saw my therapist today and went to the eating disorder group. It is so obvious that I need to quit drinking and doing drugs again, but I don't feel up to it. It's too painful and I just can't handle it. I don't know which is worse, the drug addiction and alcoholism or the eating disorder. All I know is that I'd rather be drunk than fat. I don't know if I'll ever sober up and fly right. The bulimia has me near death, vomiting, blood, bloating, and severe headaches. I don't think that I'm ever going to get it together. The worst part is that I don't even know if I want to. It's just too hard. I feel as though I'm doomed to live in darkness forever. Now, I know today that my feelings aren't facts, but at that time, what I felt is what was true to me. When I published this book, this first book, I was instructed by the Holy Spirit not to make any comments about the entries, but only to put in the words of other people, which I'm happy about because I'm writing another book now where I get to say everything I want to say. But the quote I put in there to go with that reading is from a dear author of mine that I love so much, Hugh Prather. And he said, "It's not that we fear the place of darkness, but that we don't think we are worth the effort to find the place of light." And as boy, is that not the truth. Now, I told you I'm in recovery, and I've listened to probably over 100 fifth steps. And I noticed something in my own work on myself and in the people whose fifth steps I've heard, is that our greatest fear is that we're not enough and that we don't matter. You know, I coined a term for that, and that's the title of my book I'm working on now, but I call it Delusions of Insignificance, because that's exactly the deal. We really have a true grandeur within us and we don't know it. And we bought in to this preconditioned societal lie that we're insignificant. And the only way we gain significance is by having money, looking good, having things, going to the right places, hanging out with the right people. It's all about what it looks like on the outside. But that's what the Course makes really clear, the Course in Miracles, is that, you know, just like I read, the core of our truth is not in our body, it's in our spirit. And that's what I want to talk to you and offer you some guidelines and some encouragement. Because here's the deal, we're all the same. No one's more special than anyone else. According to the Course, not even Jesus. He's just an elder brother. So in time, it seems like that some of us are farther along than the other, but in reality, we're all just walking each other home. And so I just want to encourage you to start examining that reality of you are more than you know. You are spirit. You are an embodiment of love. Only love is real. Only things created with love, only love extended is true creation. The rest of it, as the Course in Miracles quote said, is just nightmares that we've made up. And I read you from my nightmare. But I want to tell you a story that happened to me later down the road. I've had many major spiritual experiences. I've been born again about 25 times, and so it takes what it takes. And when I say born again, it's being awakened to another level of the reality of what I'm talking about. But right around about 6 months after that reading, I met a friend, and I had just had the spiritual experience, and so I was kind of talking about Emmett Fox and talking about, you know, us being, you know, temples of the living God and all those kind of things, and he just thought I was egotistical as ever. So he told me, you know, you need to pray to God and ask God to show you the truth about yourself so you can see what a miserable sinner you are. So I was like, you know, I trust God, so I prayed the prayer. And then a few days later, the most interesting thing happened, because I went in to do my affirmations, and I looked in the mirror, and all of a sudden I could see beyond the facade. I didn't see immediately that I was this spiritual being, but what I did see was that I was doing the best I could. You know, we have a saying in the program of doing the best we can with the information we had at the time. And that has been my experience with all of my life, really realizing that about myself and realizing that about others. You know, one of my favorite quotes from the Bible is when Jesus is on the cross right before he dies, and he cries out, "Forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do." And no kidding, guess what? If forgiveness is to give truth for error, if you don't know what you're doing, that's the error. And you're totally forgiven because you're doing the best you can with what you have. And that was the beginning for me. That was the beginning of starting to feel better about myself and starting to stop beating up on myself and calling myself stupid and calling myself a loser and calling myself fat and calling myself ugly, telling myself that nobody likes me, all the things that haunted me to the point of a literal suicide attempt in 1989. And then another illustration of this story is later on, because after, I told you I've been on my spiritual path for a long time, and so I've always been really into it. And one of the things, when I first started doing it, at first I'd try to do 30 minutes with God, and nothing really happened. So then I'd do an hour, and then do an hour and a half, and started kind of learning some stuff and having some great experiences and feeling better. So I really got, where, at this time in my life, this is later in my recovery, when I had about 10 or 15 years, about the time I wrote Unmasked. And I believed that I needed to have prayer time for about 4 or 5 hours a day. So my life consisted of my then Christian 12-step ministry, being a mother, and my prayer time. And when I went places, I usually had to take someone with me because I didn't feel comfortable talking to people, because I couldn't really relate to people. I was one of those people that the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous refers to as a person whose head is in the clouds without their feet firmly on the ground. So really, I was just kind of weird. But so I believed that about myself. But then, God taught me a different lesson, because something happened in our life where I had to let go of my ministry and actually go get a real job. Well, I had always believed that I could never do a real job. My earlier dream when I had been younger was to someday be a drug and alcohol counselor, but I had gone to school and failed a few times and never believed that I would ever be able to achieve that dream. But during this time when I had to go get a real job, I realized that not only was I capable of working a 40-hour-a-week job, but I was also capable of going to school full-time online, because thank God the internet had been invented, and ended up graduating with a bachelor's degree and am now a licensed chemical dependency counselor. So once I started feeling better about myself, I had to start believing in my ability to accomplish my goals. Tagore said, we will receive what we want once God prepares us to be able to receive it. That is a total paraphrase. But that's what it is. God has to make me ready to be this person. But I get to see, especially by reading my journals, that every prayer I've ever prayed has come true. Even the prayer that someday I would meet the right man. Well, I had to be changed to be able to be a wife. So one thing I'm saying is that rest assured, if you pray for something, God's working on it. He's just working on it from the inside out. So I encourage you to start looking for the value within yourself. A good way to do that, is to find out the things that are blocking you, is try to meditate and see what blocks you. If you're meditating, you're thinking, oh no, I need milk, juice. Okay, write that down. But if you're meditating and guilt from past actions, or shame, or regret, or fear start worrying you in your meditation, then that's showing you right there, literally, that's trying to block you from your good. That is your enemy. That is a lie. And remember, to truly be free is to be forgiven, which is to be given truth for error. So I just want to close by reminding you that you are loved. You are more than you know. If you don't know this, you've got a fantastic experience in front of you. I encourage you to try to meditate. I encourage you to pay attention to the things that try to block you. And if something comes up like I am worthless, I encourage you to say, no, I am not worthless. I have value. I am a precious child of God. I am able to accomplish my goals with God's help, because God is within you. The kingdom is within you. And from that place, just like Jesus said, whatever you ask in my name, it will be given. When you're coming from that place of truth, you get to create your own world of love. And it begins with loving yourself. The golden rule says to do unto others as we do, do unto others as you would have them do to you. But one of my big observations about myself is that we do unto others as we do unto ourselves. So be good to yourself. Take care of yourself. It's not selfish to say no. It's not selfish to take time alone. And it is definitely not selfish or self-centered to love yourself. So I pray that the long time sun shines upon you and all love enfolds you, and a pure light within you guide your way home. Namaste.